major spoiler alert if you haven't seen either the US or UK versions of this show. So, the Australian version of The Office, was it a good show? Not really. Was it as awful as all the reviews are claiming it to be? Not really, because this felt just like another sitcom to me. Yeah, there were moments where it was really trying to model itself off the US version a little too hard, but at the same time, given how many different sitcoms and versions of The Office have been released over the years, even though I've only seen the English-speaking versions, obviously, there's only so much that's left to do. It all relies on the chemistry of actors. It's real hard to find a truly original story in this day and age. You know, so you gotta do different spins, such as putting some more females on the cast. More on that later, hopefully. But also, in this age of, unfortunately, American-dominated culture, there's just all kinds of comparisons done to American media and all that stuff. And the US version, no one knew that it was going to last that long, because Ricky and Steven, when they're doing the UK, they knew that they were only going to make a few series/seasons of the show, whereas the American version, it was, let's see where this train takes us. And yeah, this version, they could easily renew it, they easily could not. More on that later. So, comparing it to the American version, even though by default we all going to, it's a little over the top in my mind to do so, even though, yes, as I said, there were moments where they were trying a little too hard to be like the American version, but I guess that's because that pilot episode and then the idea of some kind of diversity day/teamwork building is just something that's going to have to happen on pretty much every version of this show. It's kind of a staple. It needs to happen. But even then, unlike what the US version was doing in its first season and then having the merger thing occur a few seasons in, this version, when it had its moments that you could compare to the US version, it felt spread out during the season, because one thing that I was looking forward to and was kind of disappointed by was that in the pilot there was no joke about best boss or anything like that, but that's this show trying to be different. And you also notice how they didn't perfectly recreate everyone on the cast, because Liz on this show, she isn't just the female Dwight, she's also parts of Angela, even though, get this, if you listen to the commentary for season 1 of the US version, the only one that I've listened to commentary, the actress who plays Phyllis actually read for Dwight at one point, and they seriously considered making that character female because she was doing such a good job. So actually, female Dwight is not nearly as crazy as it sounds. And then this show's version of Meredith, she channels a little bit of Angela too. And then this show's version of Creed, which is Lloyd. They definitely have a little bit of Oscar in there, but he's not as forward-thinking. He's just weird like Creed is. This show's version of Toby Martin, he's got to be a little bit of another character too, you know? So it's a mix of different things, even though that does create a little bit of a problem, because unfortunately I did have trouble recalling a lot of the characters' names for this show, even though this version of Michael, Fran, it's really easy to remember her name, you know. But like this female warehouse head, like maybe it's Sam, but you know, it was tough for me to remember her name, because on paper, when you're describing a lot of these actors, they just seem a lot like each other. even though they all have unique hair and facial hair combinations. Okay, there is plenty to differentiate themselves, but on paper it's just a lot easier to confuse them like it was in the UK version. No, so that is one strike against this version. No, but there were moments that I found myself laughing, such as the plot that involved Liz trying to figure out who isn't cleaning the microwave or coffee maker, and then how that was resolved at the end. Excellent. The going for the more subtle approach of this show's version of Tim and Dawn. Yes, I'm going to call them Tim and Dawn rather than Jim and Pam, because what they're doing with Nick and Gwen, it felt a lot more like the UK's version, where even though across basically the same amount of time as both the UK version and the US version, you have kind of the same amount of progress, but they're not shoving it in your face, because this show's version of Roy, I think his name is Miles, he doesn't seem to be so much of a bad guy. It's just that he just doesn't totally understand that he's not doing the best job in the relationship aspect. They're going for making him just more of a guy, you know? And that could be a lot like what was going on with Dawn's fiance. I forget what his name was in the UK version, but, you know, I don't mind the more subtle approach, because especially since now that we've had two big examples of this relationship to go to, you got to do something a little bit different. Although I really wonder what they were doing with that. I guess it was a red herring, you know, where the first time Gwen gets a talking head moment, at least I'm pretty sure it was Gwen. I hope that I'm not mistaking that moment for Liz's moment that happened literally right before. Gwen seemed to think that Nick getting Liz riled up was a little bit of flirting. Especially since you have the bit where Liz was trying to get her crow, Russell, to attack Nick, even though that's the Dwight and Jim storyline. But I don't know, opposites attract. They did kind of throw that out there, is that they might be going that way, though episode 7 of this show makes it clear, no. Nick is Tim and Gwen is Dawn. No, they make that perfectly clear. But it was interesting that they did that. I really wonder what they were going for. Maybe I'm overthinking it. It's possible, okay? It's possible. And then the idea of, you know, the office potentially shutting down and doing the remote thing, well, that's an aspect of businesses that hasn't been addressed on this show, because, of course, when this franchise started, the internet was not the behemoth that it was now. COVID hadn't happened and blah, blah, blah. So that was a perfectly great angle to go for, you know. And I like how in this version, when it comes to finding a trip for the office and the crew to go for, they actually are able to go someplace, because I don't think that happened in the UK version. I don't remember. I kind of am thinking that I need to rewatch that version. I really am considering doing that. It's super cheap anyway. Right. And then the way that it ended, sure, the main story arc of the season, the potential remote location bit gets shut down, and it's revealed that everyone is going to, in fact, stay there, though not as permanent as it had been prior to that. So that story arc is taken care of, and given how Nick at the last second decides, yeah, I'm not going to quit here, I almost did, but no, I'm going to put up with it. Heat of the moment, he apologizes to Gwen, and the two of them make it clear that everything's okay. Kay, though the two of them undoubtedly do have some interest in each other. They know that now, but they're both trying to move on from that bitch. You can revisit it, but you gotta do it correctly. Yeah. And then you also gotta involve the other characters a little bit more, because what they were trying to do with Lloyd and him being evicted from wherever the heck he lived, that was definitely a good step in the right direction, but you gotta do a little bit more than that. Now, this show's version of Meredith, it's gonna be kind of tough to do more with her, unfortunately, but if you try to bring in a little bit more Phyllis, there's a chance. I doubt it'll happen, given how that character behaves. It's clearly more Meredith, but there is some hope. And then what they were doing with this show's version of Ryan, sorry, I don't remember the actual character's name. You could do a little bit more with the character. You can't. No. You just got to figure out the footing in order to do it. So they could bring it back, but the real question is, how did that show do in Australia? Because I can't really find any information about this show. I did some looking around, and there's really no big commenting about the show or its future. Granted, in this day and age of streaming, you get a lot more instances of a show popping up, and then it gets kind of forgotten because of the overpopulance of things. Because even though I do think that a lot of shows getting canceled around seasons 3 or 4 was a common theme before this age of streaming, given how many more shows there are because of streaming, you see a lot more shows just getting canceled after like 3 seasons. It just seems to be happening more and more, even though that average, I think, stays the same. So we're going to have to wait a little bit more to see what happens with this. It might continue, it might not. I'm not too picky if it does, though, but if it does, I want to see where they're going with it. But now, to address one other thing that I mentioned earlier on, the idea of putting more female people on shows. Well, the problem with this is that while I actually have 0 problems with it, the problem is exactly why are they doing it? Because broadly speaking, okay, there are 2 reasons why you can take a show like this show from America, where it mainly had male leads, and then you're trying to put more female leads into it. There are 2 big reasons as to why you could do that. Reason number 1, a female actress just happens to do well enough in their reading or pretending to be the part for X, Y, or Z, and you go, you know what? Let's have this be a female caricature. We were open to the idea anyway, let's have them do that. Or number 2, it's we're making these characters female because we simply want more female characters. Now, of course, all production crews are going to say that it's the first one, but because it's still a newer idea in this day and age, even when it really is the first one, most of the time it'll feel like the second one. Because that's what it felt like when I saw Ocean's 8, even though I have no problem with what Sandra Bullock, Mindy from the American version who played Kelly, and what the other people did. It just felt more like the second one, even though that one is a little more obvious. Really, but yeah, because Liz, she was great. It was nice to see her and Fran interact, seeing this bromance that existed between Michael and Dwight a little bit more on the female side of things. It created a different dynamic with Liz and Nick, showing that animosity where it feels less, oh, in your face, these 2 hate each other, just more of, these 2 don't like each other. It has its... How did I do that? Okay, regardless. It has its good points, but unfortunately, because of the newness of this idea, it still feels like that they're doing it just for the sake of doing it. But again, it's not a bad thing, it's just not as commonly done, because like all the Paul W.S. Anderson Resident Evil movies, yeah, that's a mouthful, all of them had a strong woman in the cast besides Mila Jovovich, either Michelle Rodriguez, whoever the heck it was that played Jill, and then Ali Lauder. You had a second strong woman in all of those movies, but it just doesn't feel totally right to have females in the same presence and popularity as male leads because we're just not as accustomed to seeing it, even though most of us aren't actually opposed to it, we're just not used to seeing that. So if there's anyone out there that's trying to use that as a justification to not like the show, hey, I felt that the actors who portrayed Fran and Liz did great. Yes, it's stuff that we've seen before, but so is almost anything else. You think that Star Wars was truly original with its storyline? Because there's a lot of people point out, if you looked at one-star reviews on Amazon before they took them away, no character development. This is a plot that I've heard before. We don't have characters, we have roles. Huh? I actually do sympathize with that. So yeah, I would really hope that you're not just trying to trash this because they're just putting some more females on there. And I think that I've summed up everything that needs to be said here. Alright, let's see if this version continues. If it does, fine. If not, fine.